Okay, so let's get into some questions that some viewers, etc., some people on your social media, on my social media, etc., have sent in, and then we'll see where that goes. And if there's anything additional you want to add, some tidbits, whatever, we'll just get that done. So the first group of questions was actually by Alex Shuai Jiao. Now I think I need to talk a little bit about him. I have mentioned him in my videos before, but he wrote a really great thesis basically on the history of Chinese Shuaijiao and its roots in Manchu and Mongol wrestling. I mean, he was the inspiration that got me digging into a lot of stuff, and a lot of the information actually came from his work as well, and then I just looked into it deeper as well. So he did a great job with that. Lots of credit should go to him, because he was going to territory that was not very often gone into. But he sent in some questions for you guys. So I'll begin with question 1. And it says, my freestyle wrestling coach from Shanghai quipped that the top 50 players are all Mongolians, even in Shuaijiao. I wonder if Chinese feel discouraged
hold on
to
one second.
play...
Look at your phone.
Huh?
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Read it again.
I'm going to leave that in.
Yeah, we can.
Fucking hell, let's go. Come on, sorry.
All right, so his first question was, my freestyle wrestling coach from Shanghai quipped that the top 50 players are all Mongolians, even in Shuaijiao. I wonder if the Chinese feel discouraged to play and watch the sports, like the Japanese were discouraged to follow sumo for a while because the top players were Mongols. So, I mean, you've spoken about this before, Lavell, about the top players being Mongols in Shuaijiao, and he's talking also from a freestyle wrestling point of view.
Oh yeah. So what people don't realize is, like, most of the real tough wrestlers in China actually come from Inner-Mongolia or Xinjiang, right? Like, a lot of those guys, even the Kazakh guys and the Uyghurs and the Mongols make most of the teams. So the hard thing is, if you look at freestyle, if you look at Greco and Shuaijiao, and even the judo now, you're going to see a lot of those top guys, and I'm not just talking about a few. I mean, each bracket, majority of them are going to be Mongol, right? And first, second, third, like, you normally see that. And you can look through the list of, for the past 10 years or more, on each bracket, each weight division, you can see that they're Mongols. And I do think it discourages Chinese. And the reason why I think so is because in Inner Mongolia, you don't really see any Han Chinese players. Like, really rare. You might see some, and most of the time it might be because they're kind of like, their friends are Mongols or something like that. Like, they grew up in a kind of Mongol community or something like that. But I don't see really anyone doing Chinese wrestling except for the Mongols. So I've heard from a lot of Chinese that they feel almost like it's not even theirs. It's almost like, oh, that's the Mongol thing. Exactly. They wrestle, we don't wrestle, right? So I think that's a problem, but it's a problem if we want it to grow. But if we actually look at the history, what we've been saying all along, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it never really was a Han Chinese thing that every Han Chinese man was doing. It was a thing that the Mongols were doing, right? So,
yeah, to go to the answer to this question, I would just come from another angle, but the conclusion is the same. Chinese played a very important role in the development of Han Chinese, okay? Also played a role in the development of wrestling, but later on, after the Ming War period, let's say after the Republican era. Some of them already were, but like after that, up until 1998 or 97, when Chinese wrestling was abolished, so like taking out the national games.
Yeah,
because until that period, like the government gave fundings to these like Shuaijiao, how to say it, like dui, how you call
teams.
It?
Professional teams.
Yeah. Professional teams. Yeah. When this like came to an end, it was an end of an era. Why? Because there was no incentive anymore into doing this as a sport, and this is not a part of. It's not a part of like Chinese culture. Like, it's very far from Chinese culture. Like Most of Chinese people don't know about Chinese wrestling, don't know about wrestling at all. And that's why, like, Inner-Mongolia still has champions in everything. Because wrestling is an integral part, a core part
cultural lifestyle
of Mongolian essence, yes. And that's the reason why. Mongols, great number of Mongols are in Mongolia, of course, Xinjiang and Shanxi. Yeah. Shanxi has a very good and strong team, but they're all Mongols.
Yes. People don't realize that. Yes, the people, like even in Shanxi, like the sports university there, the sports university in Xi'an, like they're some of the best in like Sanda and Shuaijiao. But I know the coaches. They're from Ujumchin. You know what I mean? They're from Inner-Mongolia. And it's interesting because like they have a few good Han Chinese guys, like real good. But it's weird because they, like, I've seen them compete in Shuaijiao. I'm like, wow, they're beasts. It's funny. This past summer, I saw them come to Inner-Mongolia to compete, and it was like they were just like another person here. You know what I mean? Like another wrestler. So it's interesting. I do think the Chinese are feeling a bit discouraged, but also it's not just their fault. The parents, man, and we want to get real. They don't push that culture anymore. They don't push it as something that their kids should do. You're gonna get hurt. I hear it all the time. Oh, you're gonna get hurt. Don't do that. I don't want you doing that. I want you to go to school. I want you, So.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a little bit of feedback from you guys know I worked for the official Wushu Federation for many years, and there's correlation to the problems there with Shuaijiao as well. So when we're talking about discouraging of people that are practicing, point one, and spectatorship, point two, there's the first big problem with sport in China is that they don't connect spectators to practitioners, and they don't connect either of those to daily life. So it's either you're a professional athlete or you don't do it. Exactly. It's either the professional teams are doing the sport or you're not doing it. There's very little grassroots development of sport in a healthy way here. And that is why Wushu, Chinese martial arts, specifically the Wushu that has been coming through as a sport, that's Han. So in answering Alex's question, if they're discouraged to watch Shuaijiao because the Mongols are doing well, why aren't they watching Wushu? Well, Wushu's got many problems as a sport, but it's also completely disconnected from the grassroots people. There's no connection to them. So they're not only, why would you watch it if you don't even practice it, or if it's only professional athletes, or it's something that's out there with all these flippies and things that you don't understand either. There's no reason to watch it. So Shuaijiao has a similar problem, and there's another big problem in China here, that the only incentive for a professional team is something like Olympics or the national games. So the second you don't have that, the sport dies. So what do you see with the young kids here? There was a big period, most of them were doing Taekwondo. WTF Taekwondo. Olympic, in my opinion, the worst of the two, but Olympic Taekwondo. And do you think their parents are going to watch? They couldn't give a shit either. I mean, if their kids are practicing, maybe they'll go watch them, but there's no incentive for them to watch because the sporting culture here is so different to what we understand in the West. And wrestling culture for the Mongols, as I said in the video, as we've been discussing, it's in their culture and their life. So no other external factors is going to stop them from wrestling and being involved in terms of wrestling as part of a main part of their life. You can cancel it out of the national games. They're going to be in the grasslands doing nadams and wrestling.
They don't listen. Mongols don't care. Like even right now, what people don't understand. So in China now, and this happened since pretty much I moved here, started changing. That the government was putting more money, I guess you can say, into the sports programs for like Shuaijiao. They're pushing it into the schools, more schools and universities. So now you got a ton of professional teams, way more than before, all of a sudden. But they're filled up with they're all judokas, they're all freestyle wrestlers and Greco guys that maybe weren't good enough in there, and they came to do Shuaijiao, and most of them don't really play Shuaijiao as well. They just do it to make money, right? But see, the Mongols don't look at any of them as different. Like even now, the Mongols told me in Inner-Mongolia, one of the teams we were training with, they were like, yo, we're not going to really do too much Chinese wrestling anymore. We're going to do judo, even though they're a Chinese wrestling team. But they're saying Chinese wrestling doesn't have much money in it. Judo for the Olympics, like, we got to get some recognition, right? But what's interesting is they don't really care what style of wrestling it is. They just love wrestling. But China doesn't, like, when I say China, I mean the Han Chinese, they don't even really care about wrestling at all.
Yeah,
right?
No, they don't.
So they don't. Even I've spoken to people here that when I said, oh, I do like Chinese style wrestling, they're like, well, we have a wrestling style? Like,
exactly.
You know? So I'm like, whoa, that's kind of weird to hear in China, right? But, you know, so it is what it is, man. I mean, I do think one thing I am seeing is that more overseas Chinese, right, are starting to become interested because they feel like it's a way to connect to their culture, right?
Yeah, that's where it's at.
Yeah, that's where it's at right now. But yeah, we'll see, man. I honestly like the idea of the Mongols kind of running through and taking everything right now, because I think it really shows like the importance even of like Mongolian wrestling within Chinese wrestling, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know, man.
I mean, we can also understand this from like a Chinese culture perspective. So
Yeah.
I'm one of the first like proponent not to classify our Chinese culture as a singular thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we need to sometimes to talk about these things. We need to do it in a certain way. And like let's use it in this moment. But Chinese culture is not a proponent of sports or like any martial virtue. Like historically, okay? Like you have the basis, one of the bases of Chinese culture being Confucianism, for example, or like you have this idea of like 一动不如一静, like a movement is not the same as staying still, and that staying still means something completely different. Like even in Qing Dynasty, the martial artists, all those guys that practice this kind of stuff, they were at like the bottom of society.
Yeah, the fringe. Like, we're martial artists. We've always been the fringe of society and the minority.
Which at the contrary, okay, for the Mongols or the Manchu, they value the martial principle. Okay, these things, princes, Khan, all these kind of like persons worship this kind of like martial attitude or martial practice, which is not the case of Chinese culture, which is also the reason why even today Chinese are not interested in it. It's just like not part of what is thought to them or like what they value.
Well, even like what I said earlier, it's like, for instance, with the Mongols, I was saying the first kind of evidence of them writing about when they first said Janga, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't say Janga or Janga Bokh, right? They said Janga Gagun, which is a deity, a living Buddha. See, even today, you don't ever tap a wrestler's shoulder. A wrestler is considered once he wears the Jangan, wears the uniform, he's a deity. He's a protector, the guardian of your tribe, of your village, of your sum, right? So it's like, that's the importance that the Mongol, that's how high they value this. That's how high it is, right? I mean, look at, if you look in the background, right there on top, you got two Jatak. Jatak is supposed to be in a high place because everything is based around that. Like, it's like they're the most important part of your society, really, one of the most important. But if you said I'm a wrestler to a Han Chinese person, average person, they'll be like, man, you must not have been good in school. You must be kind of stupid, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate, but that's how it is, yeah.
I mean, it's value of Wen against Wu. Like, it's as simple as
literary over martial, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get on to question 2. Do we also see other people, like Kazakh, Kyrgyz, or other Turkic ethnicities achieving good results in Shuaijiao?
Okay, so the reason why I say I don't see it yet is not that I don't think they can, but they don't really do it, right? You don't really see them training. And most of the Kazakh guys I know that are wrestling, and I mean the ones in China, not the ones in Kazakhstan. They don't even know what Shuaijiao is.
I think he means in China, obviously.
And within China, most of them do freestyle or Greco. It's just what they do. I don't know why. It's like they want to go to Olympic kind of art, right? why would you spend your time and money and all your effort doing an art that you're not going to really
get anywhere,
benefit from? And then also they do their traditional art, right? Like you see them doing the, Kazakh Koresh or belt wrestling as well in China in certain regions. So I don't see any of them really doing Shuaijiao yet. I just see Mongols, Han, Chinese, and it used to be Hui. I don't even see many of them on a high level wrestling anymore. You know what I mean? Okay. Like you don't really see that. You don't really see the Hui guys, even in Inner-Mongolia. Yeah, and even in Inner-Mongolia, there's a shit ton of Hui minority people, right?
Yeah.
And even one of the coaches, Maharning is a famous coach, but none of his students are Hui. They're all Mongol. All of his students are Mongol. And I think the guys that were dealing with him that were Hui, they're actually referees or something. They become like refs or something. But they might dabble. Right? So anyway, I don't see them wrestling at the moment. I don't really know why, but I'm pretty sure it's because freestyle just gives you more, man, opportunities.
All right, cool. Shall we go on to question 3?
Mm-hmm. Let's go.
Okay, question 3. Okay, other ethnic minorities such as Miao and Hui also seem to have good wrestling tradition. Mm-hmm. Are their influences apparent in Shuaijiao? I have read a paper that claims the Hui influence is there, but I couldn't find any specifics. We spoke a little bit about that earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the Miao having any effect or influence on Shuaijiao. I mean, that's a very far away, very different group of people. So, but the Hui we spoke about a little bit.
Yeah.
In the past.
Yeah, I've never heard anything of the Miao people or.
There's still local wrestling in the south from Yi and other people like mixed male and female wrestling is still going. But it's so like
that's called marriage.
No, at the Yi people, for instance, like one of the reasons why they still wrestle and like kind of really develop. Obviously, a lot of people wrestled, but they when the Yun Dynasty, pretty much was ending. A lot of the Mongols had fled and went over there and mixed with the Yi people, right? And so you still see there's even today still some Mongol Yi type of like mixture of people there that have an interesting language. I was reading up about them. I was really curious because I was like, why do they wrestle, right? But anywhere you see wrestling in China that's like not Mongol or something or from Kazakh or Uyghurs, it's normally some kind of people like in Sanxi or something that were like herdsmen as well.
Yeah, that comes back to lifestyle.
Yes, you never really see like the average like person working in the cornfield wrestling or something.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next question. Unless Lavell's frozen.
Did you get stuck?
Huh?
Your picture. Oh, you're back.
Okay, you're back.
Okay, let's go on to the next question. Shuaijiao doesn't seem very popular anymore. Is there a possibility of extinction in the near future? Also, is judo a popular alternative in China? In the Netherlands, where I live, judo basically replaced all native forms of wrestling, if there was any tradition in the first place. Nevertheless, I have never heard of Dutch wrestling, but many are familiar with judo. So, what do you guys think about the future of Shuaijiao's possibility of extinction here?
Well, I think to me, it's almost already extincted. Like, the way you practice high-level Shuaijiao from, like, the sports universities, it's like, not the traditional Shuaijiao, okay? It's like, you train to compete at a maximum level.
Yeah.
With, as we were saying before, with, like, weight categories. Like, it's not the same as the Shuaijiao that was there in the 50s and the 60s or even until the 1990s, okay? The level of the techniques applied, it's not the same. So once people like Li Baoru dies, okay, like Wang Weiyong is already dead. Other big guys already are like dying. And they have some like students that are really good, but there's nobody that was the Li Baoru of that time. Like Li Baoru started with everybody and was it was good. Okay, he wrestled with Wang Wenyong. Okay, he had like he even had like Bao Sanling, which is another great guy, like teaching him, or Bu Enfu. Like the level is not there. There's not there anymore.
Well,
okay.
I think I see it a little differently. Like the way I see it is that I don't think it's gonna go extinct at all. I don't think it is. Actually, I think more people are doing it now than they were as of recent, because in the last 20 years, because now you got more schools doing it. Is it like traditional? Yeah. No, but then pretty much what we talked about the whole time is it kept changing. It literally changed every couple of years, if you really think about it. You know, from 1912 to 1920 to 1930, it's constantly changing. So it's just another change, like different version of what it was 20 years ago, right? So also we got to remember, like, with people like us doing it, how can it go extinct?
Yeah, I think he kind of meant more within China, though. And I honestly, I don't know if it's more popular than it would have been, let's say, 15 or 20 years ago now.
Well, the past 2-3 years, there was, as Lavell mentioned before, there was a great push, okay? So Shuaijiao went back into the national games in 2021.
Yes.
They're trying to build new things. But the thing is that I think they still do it because they want to make it Olympic. There's this obsession, okay?
I've heard them say that recently. They want to make it Olympic. It's never going to happen. But
no, never.
But if you look at the numbers, even like the nationals, what was it, last year or 2 years ago? I can't remember. But the national competition, they had like 800 competitors. Like that's more than before. Normally it's like 500. Yeah. Right. So that's a shit ton. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them are judo guys. You know what I mean? Coming up, guys. You know. So I get it, but it does show you that it's still here. Now, how long, I don't know, but I'm in Inner-Mongolia. My view on it is a little different too, because everyone here still does it.
Exactly.
Like they'll always kind of do it to some degree. So I don't see it as, if you're talking about China as in all of China, but yeah, among the Chinese communities, yeah, it probably will die out sooner than later.
Look, my thing is this, and as I mentioned, I've been involved in the official side of sport for a long time here, and I have a problem because I'm a little bit more skeptical. You can have a push, but if it's not an organic drive, if the sport is not developing organically, you're doing the same thing over and over again with different sports, expecting a different result.
Yeah. Yep.
That's not how you develop it. You got to find a way to make it develop organically, like from the bottom up, naturally. Now you're sitting in Inner-Mongolia, and like I said, the culture and the people, the Mongols, that's part of their life. You don't have to do anything. It's organic there. But outside of that, you can push it. But the second you stop pushing it, those numbers are going to drop.
Well, the thing is, they don't really push either. Like, they're not really pushing.
No, I mean in the rest of China. Like.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Even in the rest of China, they're not really pushing. They're trying to kind of, now they're doing this thing where they're kind of trying to stop Mongols from doing it, right?
That's a disaster. Recipe for failure. That's a recipe for failure.
It is, because they don't want them to be the winners every time. And you see even now, I told you, the reason why a lot of the schools are changing from Shuaijiao to judo is because it's a political situation. But right now, they're not getting the funding. So they're supposed to get a certain amount of money, and some of the Chinese teams get a certain amount of money for the athletes. But in Inner-Mongolia, something weird is going on where they're just not getting it. These kids are poor, man. You know what I mean? So they're like, yo, let me go over to judo. Let me go over. Now, these kids are just a lot of them are now just saying, I'm just going to do Mongolian wrestling. I can make money right away. I can make a life out of this. So why even waste my time with the other stuff? I think that's the way to go. I think make Shuaijiao kind of like Mongolians make Bokh, in terms of like make it almost like jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Make it its own thing. Don't get it involved with all the... But that's impossible, right? You can't.
No, it's not possible here. That's what I said. They're going to do the same thing they've done with everything else and expect a different result.
Yes. So it isn't possible. Unfortunately, that's the reason why I'm going kind of in terms of like how I promote myself now is both, but I really focus on book because I know that it's not, no one has his hand on it yet. No one's taken everything from it yet. So I'm like, let me make sure it stays pure as it grows internationally, and that doesn't happen, because if that happens, like, it's not going to look good for even the Mongols, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get on to his next question. These are all still from Alex. So, the revivalist Manchus list horse riding and bow shooting as core activities to the Manchu identity. Do you think there is room to promote Shuaijiao within that group to reinforce further the importance of wrestling within what remains of the Manchu identity? So, he's talking about the current Manchu revivalist groups. Yeah. What do you guys think?
We need to be very careful with that. I mentioned before the happening of the slapping of the professor Yan Chongyan.
Yeah.
Which was a Qing historian that was slapped by this dude while he was like signing copies of his book. Of his book. This guy that slapped him was like the founder of one of a very particular website. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna mention what that website is about. I'm not gonna go there. It's a very interesting question, but the question at the basis is, well, is there still a Manchu identity?
Exactly.
Or we have to build it from zero? If there is, okay, can you do that?
Yeah.
Can you push for a revival of? No, it's gonna be dangerous. It's dangerous for them too.
Yes. You can't right now. You can't do that. And first of all, what I've seen, there's no real Manchu culture anymore. Not really. Not people that are going around like living like Mongols, living like Manchus, right? And you can't even mention that kind of stuff here, and like it's trouble. Yeah, and then people don't even really know much. I've met Manchurian people that don't know anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, most of them don't know. They don't speak the language. It's a tough one, man.
Look, I mean, we need to understand the development of the so-called Manchus from 1644 onward, because they were in the northeast of China, and after they conquered China, they basically made Beijing their home. So, you know, you're talking about Manchus being now people of Beijing, really, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history there. So, look, if they're revivalist, let's also talk about, like, if we talk about the Manchu way or the old way, which they call Fedoro, you know, even if you see Qianlong Emperor, and before Qianlong, they started complaining about this. The emperor started complaining that the Manchus, particularly the bannermen, which are the Manchus, they are the only Manchus, started losing the old way. But when they spoke about the Manchu Fedoro, the old way, or the Manchu way, let's call it the Manchu way for simplistic sake, so we don't confuse old with anything else. They talked about a few important things, and the one was horse riding. So the ability to be really skilled horsemen. The second thing was really skilled archers. The third thing was speaking the Manchu language.
Yeah.
And the fourth thing was to live a frugal and Spartan lifestyle.
Yeah.
They never mentioned wrestling.
Yeah.
Oh, but it might not be central, but it was.
But it's part of it.
Sure bit. Yeah.
So if you're gonna say, is there room? I would say there is room. Whatever you want to do. If you're of Manchu ethnicity and you feel like connecting with your roots, do Shuaijiao. It's only gonna get you closer to it. So
yes, for sure.
Then it's better to think about it as like, you know, giving back the voice to those who lost it, saying that this comes from a certain way, instead of saying, you know, like we need to revive some kind of identity. I don't know. But
well, look,
giving, you know.
I think the first step is to admit where these arts come from, which we're kind of doing.
100%.
And then these people that are interested in that, or they're wanting to get closer to whatever their historical roots are, they can investigate it. I think there's a lot of value to that.
And let me say this too, because we're talking so much about like Manchu and Mongol origins of Shuaijiao. I don't want like Han Chinese or any kind of any Chinese person, I'm referring to Han at the moment, to feel discouraged, be like, oh wait, it's not my thing type of thing, right? And then feel like, oh, I don't want to do it, or uncomfortable with that. It's like, no, it's for everyone. We're just talking about the origins, and Han played a big factor in what it is today, right? And Hui, so like, don't get it twisted. We're not saying it's theirs, they should do it. We're saying everyone should do it. We're just shedding light on the truth of the history, so you can enjoy it as well and understand it and be like, oh, this makes more sense. Oh, I understand this now too. And it also opens doors for people that want to connect to their Manchu roots, or even Mongolians, like that are like, that don't have to feel like, you don't know how many times I've heard people here where I asked them, like, what do you like better, Chinese wrestling or Mongolian wrestling? And they're like, Mongolian wrestling, like, it's the best. Like, I don't really like Chinese. Like, a lot of Mongols will say, I don't like Chinese wrestling. I just do it to make money or do it whatever, right? And if they knew that, well, it's not really that much different than what you're doing, I think they would look at it differently, right? But
yeah,
that's the reason why I'm doing this, so they can.
In their defense, I'd also say the way that the history's been presented and completely.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, then they're upset for those reasons, and that really is the fault of carrying forward the wrong narrative. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, let's get on to the next question. His last question was, what are some major differences between Bokh and Shuaijiao training?
Like currently, like today.
Yeah.
I would say, let me think. Okay, so what makes, I guess I would have to ask someone and say, what makes, Shuaijiao, a wrestler that does Shuaijiao and a wrestler that does Bokh different? Because if you say, what are the difference between the two styles training, well, how far do you go back? Like, what determines what is what, and who does it this way? Because in Inner-Mongolia, doesn't matter what wrestling style you do, you all train the same way. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, I saw that when I was there too. I saw that with the guys that participated in those events. Some of them were freestyle champs that just competed in the national games. Some of them were judo champs, and they just came back to their grasslands and they just started doing Bokh straight away.
Exactly. So it's a little bit like, well, they do all types of stuff. It depends on the individual's background. But traditional Mongolian wrestling, I would say a big difference is really it comes to like the lifestyle in terms of the training. Like, they get what most people don't get, which is herding the animals, understanding, wrestling the animals, connecting with the nature, connecting with the animals, learning to build a development and the sensitivity from riding horses. Like, they get so much little things that you don't get if you're just training at a gym every day, right? So that's kind of the most I would say the difference is in the training. And like my teacher, that's what he really pushes. Like, he's always saying, I don't think people can understand Mongolian wrestling if they don't understand like our culture and do some of the stuff that we do, right? And do I fully agree? Well, yes and no. I do agree with him. I think that they experience it, but I mean, let's be real. Westerners not going to come and live here like me, right? Most people. So I think you can still teach it, and I think you can still develop that, but it does make a difference, and I think that's the biggest thing. But here's my but. People that do Shuaijiao still live that same way here. So technically, you can say they're doing Shuaijiao training, but it's still like Mongolian.
Well, I think this question isn't aimed at those kind of. I think it's aimed at the general. Yeah. And maybe Manu, you've been doing both now for a bit of time, right? So maybe as a pair of different eyes on your experience, what do you see different?
Well, how to put it? I think today's Shuaijiao practice outside of universities, it's lacking. So it's, as I said before, Jibengong and very little wrestling. Okay. Yeah. I do believe that Shampuyin, for example, because if I want to go back in history, for Shuaijiao, I only think about Shampuyin or before. But Shampuyin is an historical point.
Yeah.
They wrestled more than what they did Jibengong. And it's the same with Mongolians. Like, the number of Jibengong evolved in time. We have a ton of Jibengong right now, but it was probably not the case during the Shampuyin. Okay, we know for sure that what we have today, the 36 techniques, 36棒子, and all the variations, it's a modern concept. It's a Mingguo period concept.
Republican era.
Republican era. So before, there was less classification, okay?
Yep.
More wrestling, some training, of course. Some. But as I mentioned before, it's very likely that the Jibengong were made for kids, and the rest is wrestling. And for technically speaking, well, there's differences between Shuaijiao and Bokh because the jacket changes.
Yes.
So the grips, the tactics.
The tactics.
If we're talking about, if we're mentioning that, it's like, then if we're talking about training methods in terms of all of that, I was kind of thinking more of on like strength training and how they condition. But if we're going to talk about like that, it's like there are a lot of differences. For instance, like you just said, you just really reminded me, the Mongols, they spar like all the time, dude. Like literally here, during training season, right? Like I say it's training season, but the times they train, because a lot of times they have to go to their land and tend to the animals. They train twice a day, or we train twice a day, and you spar probably 3 hours a day. Because like the second session is normally almost all sparring, and then the first session you'll probably spar some too, right? So it's like, and sometimes with like Huha, sometimes we'll spar twice. Like each session we spar, and for like, there's no time limit. You might just go spar for 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour. You know what I mean? So there's so much more sparring, and then that's separate from your strength training, right? So it's like, I don't know. When I look at the Shuaijiao teams here, it's a little bit more structured because they have to learn certain things. Like I told you, Mongolian wrestling, you have to find the feeling. But Chinese wrestling, they're like, I'm going to teach you these specific techniques, and you drill them. Mongolian wrestling is like, all right, you kind of know that technique, but let's see how you do it here, and I grab you here, and I turn. You go against a gorilla, you know what I mean? The 300-pound man, you got to figure out how to do it a little differently. It's like there's so much more like feeling involved in when Mongolians spar with not with Shuaijiao, with Mongolian wrestling, they are all feeling you the whole time. It's not like this hard Shuaijiao type of match. It's like constantly like, oh, I'm feeling my mistakes. I'm feeling where the weight is at, right? Like that's a big difference, I would say, in the training, because I'm used to the Shuaijiao like pretty intense, fast-paced. There's a time limit, right? So I, to this day, have that problem when I'm doing Mongolian wrestling. Like, I start to go ham, and my heart start beating, and I start revving that engine, you know what I mean? And I'm ready just to go. But, like, that doesn't really work for the mentality and the rule set for Bokh. Like, you can't do that, you know what I mean? So.
All right, cool. Let's go on to, those were all Alex's questions. Now we're going to get on to Peter Wang, who submitted the question on YouTube. And he says, what is unique about Shuaijiao and Bokh in comparison to other wrestling styles? More aggressively phrased, if you're a mixed martial artist and choose another grappling art as part of your kit, what are you missing out on?
For you, Lavell.
It's all you. I'm kidding. Oh, man. So, I mean, to make it simple, we talked about this kind of earlier and giggled a little bit, but it's like, listen, if you want to do Mongolian wrestling, if you want to learn Chinese wrestling, do it. If you don't. But there is benefits to it, just like any art. You got to find the benefit that you need within yourself as a martial artist. For me, Shuaijiao and Bokh, like, it gives you the sensitivity. It gives you a ton of techniques that are done a little bit differently, a little bit more dynamic than a lot of stand-up grappling arts. So you get more of a variety of techniques to do. You also learn how to do jacket and no jacket at the same time, essentially. So there's a lot of things that it gives you. But if you want to do freestyle, do that too. If you like, it's up to you. You really have to feel it, because everyone's looking for something different, right? So I got guys, for instance, that do Tai Chi that want to do Shuaijiao to understand their Tai Chi better, right? Because they're like, there's throws in Tai Chi. Let me see if this connects. So it's like, you just got to find your way. But as a guy that likes to fight, I think Mongolian wrestling is one of the best overall wrestling styles for just fundamentals and understanding a basic foundation of wrestling. Like the way you develop, what are Mongolians good at? Not falling, right? They're just hard to get down. They're hard to get down. So you're going to develop ability to stand and always be in this dominant position because you're literally training to be on top every time, right? So, and then you get the base, you get strong legs, you get good feeling. From there, you can go and do anything you want, and you have this foundation. So that's what I think. For me, Chinese style wrestling adds more on to having just more techniques and more dynamic techniques because you have more like leg grabbing and other things like that. And the jacket's a little different, so you might pull a little different. But that's what I would say, to be honest.
You want to add something, Manu?
Well, yeah, I would say, so sometimes I don't really consider myself like a fighter. That's why, like, because we, as I think we have sometimes in the West, we have this mentality that we need to fight, we need to win, we need to do stuff that is 100% effective, which I do believe that if you do something, you need to know how to use it 100%. Yep. Which is Shuaijiao and Bokh are both excellent. Why do I do them? I don't do them to fight
Chicks.
in the street, although, like, yeah.
Chicks, right?
Chicks. But no, I don't do them for the chicks because I should be studying, I don't know, international politics in Qing, maybe for the chicks. But no, I study philosophy, religion, and other stuff. So, but I think it's a great, like, it's what I like. I like history. I like listening to people. I like seeing the things develop and how they developed and having like an experience with a different culture, and that's what Shuaijiao and Bokh both give me, and that's how I live them. I don't live like I need to do MMA.
Well,
I like to be good at both, but that's it.
Yes. I agree. Look, I mean, you got there's two questions really that you got to ask yourself. What are your goals? Because if you're an MMA fighter and your goal is to become a champion in MMA, well, MMA is a format, so you're going to do what is best for that format. Yeah. Cool. So let's not be retarded. If I wanna hammer a wall down, if that's my goal, I'm not gonna go say how can I use the sponge to hammer a wall down. Maybe you can do it, but is it the smartest way to go about it? Probably not. Are there some aspects of your sponge use that you could use? Yeah, but that's the thing. If you've got a goal, okay, find the best tools for it. That being said, but coming back to what you said. That being said, in all martial arts, because they're martial, you're going to find things that can help you in MMA because it's a big open format. Exactly. It's a bigger format. But, you know, I don't like the style versus style talk. I think it's stupid. I think it's so... I mean, look, MMA is a format that has evolved into certain styles. Like, there's ways that people train MMA because those are the best tools in that format. You change the rules tomorrow, that way your training is going to change tomorrow too. So it's a very hard question to answer because he used the idea of somebody who does MMA. Why would he then do Bokh? And I think that's a difficult question because it becomes more specific. If we want to talk about if you're a martial artist, what are you going to gain from these? Those things that you mentioned. Those things that you mentioned are all valid. And I think martial arts is valuable outside of just the simple use that it has directly to a specific goal. I mean, like MMA, it has more than that. It's got so much more to offer you. But it also has function. So don't forget the function.
That's kind of the issue. That's kind of the issue is like, because I used to get that question a lot, like about the MMA thing and like, will it work in MMA? I'm like, I don't know. Like, will you make it work? You know?
Because that's the other side.
At the end of the day, people always ask me, hey, I want to learn some of that Mongolian wrestling because I want to add it to my this or that. I'm like, I can show you sweeps and tricks, but you can also learn those things from judo and other styles. Is it different? Yes. But if you want to get good at it and be able to do it on anyone, the level that you're imagining, then you got to really train Mongolian wrestling and understand the art. That way you can apply it in any situation. Your knowledge has to increase in that because I can show you a technique and great, if it works for you, cool. But if you want to learn the way that they do it, because when you're looking at a Mongolian wrestle, you're not looking at just a technique. You're like, damn, the way he's moving, the way he's pulling, and
yeah, it's going to become a part of you. The whole art becomes a part of you.
Yeah, that takes time. So I think the MMA question to me is like, it's a tough one, man. Just do what you want to do, but they're good arts. I would say they're good arts. If you want to do them, great. If you don't, you are missing out.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to the next guy. So that was Peter Wong. The next one is EZEHSK. Okay, so that's a username. His first question is actually covered in my series, so I'm not going to answer that. But his second question was, has any of these two arts influenced Sanda at any time? Ooh. So he means, has Bokh or Shuaijiao influenced Sanda? Well, actually, there's a very simple answer to that. Yes.
Pretty simple, yeah. Yes.
It has. Yeah. When they were developing Sanda and trying to put a curriculum together for guys in the early stages, even Li Baoru himself was directly involved in assisting to create takedowns and throws that were used directly in the early days of Sanda. So 100% yes. The Shuaijiao that you see, well, it's evolved again over time, but the initial early days of Sanda, a lot of the takedowns were taken and brought in by Li Baoru and a few other key Shuaijiao people. So for sure. For sure. So again, I want to say one other thing though. Sanda is being called a style again, and it's a format. So again, people shouldn't get confused with these two concepts. A format can develop into a style over time in a sense that everybody within that rule set will start doing the same thing because it's effective. But that doesn't stop you from doing other things as long as they conform to the rules of a format. So a format is different to a style. So
Yes. Yep.
I mean, at the very beginning of Sanda, a lot of like guys from Shuaijiao went into it and just started murdering people by throwing them because they were just like grabbing the kick and just throwing it, grabbing the kick.
They were just closing the distance and throwing,
Exactly.
And look, we saw this repeat itself not in terms of Sanda. We saw it in the first UFC, like the guys that you didn't know what they were doing, and if you were striking and you didn't know what was going on, a guy closed the distance, put you on the floor and started choking you. You don't know what to do. But over time, you learn, I got to learn that. Then over time, things develop. Same thing happened there. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next guy. So the next person is Downslide. And let's see. What do you view as the evolution or history of Shuaijiao from its roots to its current embodiment in China? Those were answered in the video series. If there's anything you want to add about the Republican era development of Shuaijiao, that could be interesting from a technical point of view. Manu, I thought maybe you wanted to say something.
Well, like most of what we see right now today, it comes from that period. The way of training, the number of Jibengong, the Shishan Taibao, for example, which is the number of exercises that you do for kids. All of that come from that period. For example, right now, or at least in that period, the Zhongfan was became part of the Shuaijiao curriculum. Zhongfan
is large flagpole.
Large flagpole that you like move around in like exhibition. That was thanks to Bao Shanling. That was a very important wrestler, Manchu, by the way, from the Zhenghuanqi, so the plain yellow banner. That studied the art with a guy called Arbienzi. So a guy that had two how do you call it? Ponytail here, one here, one here. I'm not joking.
A real ladies' man.
And then and then brought him to Tianqiao. And with Zhongfan, it happened the same exact thing. At the beginning, 5 movements. Only 5 movements. Right now, more than 30. The same thing. So history repeats itself. Like things evolve in the same way. And the Mingguo period the Republican era is extremely interesting because we have a lot of names, a lot of data. We have some of the guys that, had their teacher in that period, or like their stories. So if I have to give you a suggestion, you go to China, find some old dudes and talk with them. Let them like tell you their stories. And a lot of Shuaijiao. So how I would research that period, which is if I had to divide Shuaijiao in periods, I would do imperial until 1911, Republican era until 1998, which is the year in which Shuaijiao was like taken out of the national games, and then after. That big middle part is where a ton of Shuaijiao was developed. Like for example, Qianbie, we have like it was developed during that period. We have a movement right now called La Chuai or Pei. Was not a traditional movement. So stuff changes, and that's a very interesting period.
Okay.
Well,
you wanted to say something?
Something that's interesting because I wonder when some of those techniques came in there because, for instance, like Qianbie, well, they call it Zhibizi here, right? The Mongols were already doing those techniques. So I'm wondering, like, why wasn't people in Shuaijiao doing some of those techniques?
No, I have an idea. So, as we mentioned before, the names were very, very little. We had namings for techniques. But like more than specific namings that we have right now, for example, Qianbie or Sige Bo Chuai or whatever. So very specific names for very specific movement with a very specific setup. Before, there was like big categories. Like a category of a technique where you turn your body and then do a technique.
Yes, Mongolian wrestling is like that right now.
Exactly. So I believe that was the same for the Manchu because we have sources, and I believe the technique that we today call Y, I believe it was in Manchu was Murimbi, which is turning your body. And when we teach Beijing style, traditional style, when you teach Y, you teach Y, and then you teach the change in Qianbie, which when Y doesn't work, that has your leg in between your opponent, you switch it outside and do Qianbie. That's why there was no like division, because it's the same technique with a different angle. And with time, you want to write down
clarity.
Yes.
So, okay. His next question. So his next question we already answered because it is the same as the previous one. The third one, other than the physical benefits and technical knowledge you gain from your study of Shuaijiao and or Bokh, do you feel the study of these arts have had any effect on your worldview or general view of yourself?
Well, I can talk for me. I made a ton of friends. And I think that's something that I really push when I try to get people into this. Like, a ton of friends I made it through, wrestling. Maybe they were not they didn't like me at first, or
nothing brings people together like beating each other up for a bit first. No, I'm being honest.
Exactly.
I'm being honest.
Exactly. And I remember with my friends after wrestling practice, completely sweating, going to a restaurant with shirtless with these fat guys and drinking baijiu at night. That's
those are special moments.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say, I mean, obviously, like you said, friends, community, for me personally, I have, my background was a little bit different because I first did Shuaijiao, but under combat via Taiwan. So it was a combat variation of it, right? More military, I guess you can say, with some strikes and stuff like that. So when I was doing that and not learning Mongolian wrestling, I felt my mentality was also different in how I viewed martial arts. It was more, and I was younger too, right? So it's more about the fighting, right? But with Mongolian, and also the fast pace of it, doing Shuaijiao and that and idea of going hard and fast. But coming to Inner-Mongolia, I think it really made me just kind of relax more. Not just because of the style, but through the style, I'm I have to learn how to feel and connect. So that connection is not just about connecting bodies, that you're literally connecting with other humans, right? You're learning how to understand people, you're learning how to look at everything and break everything down about a person, his personality and his physical, right? So I found like I almost like it's kind of sounds weird, but I feel like now I can look at someone and I know everything about them. Not their little stories and stuff. Everyone has stories, but just overall who they are. And it's like
it's because you've been spending too much time with those Mongolian shamans.
It's so true. No, but really though, like, and who always talks about that stuff, like, you know, and he's talking about the harmony and even understanding spirituality a little bit different, like understanding people more and like how people view themselves and how they view the world. It really does change a lot of things, and even your performance as a wrestler. I told the story before, but I have a friend. He's one of my teammates, training partners, whatever you want to say. He's a really good wrestler, right? But that kid, you know, I remember I told you before, he was losing for a while, right?
Yeah, you told me this
and
story.
And he went and he went to his grasslands and he saw he just kind of spent time there connecting. But it's like hearing that from a Western perspective, I'm like, yeah, okay, sounds great. But actually seeing it, I'm like, oh shit, there's something to this, right? Like, so anyway, it makes me. I'll say the biggest thing about Mongolian wrestling, it really makes me reflect on myself and who I am as a person. I know it sounds cliche and corny, but like I really have to look deep, because in Mongolian wrestling, there's no weight divisions. You can't fear the big man, and you can't be scared and underestimate the little man. So you really have to reflect on, do you think you are the badass that you think you are? Do you know that, right? And when you're humbled, can you remain believing that you're going to be great anyway? Because you will be humbled here. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So well, anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah. Those are good.
I want to connect to that a little bit, because you mentioned spirituality, which most of people, when they practice something, they kind of, especially right now in this age, to not pay attention to those details, which like are key in those type of practices. Like, if let's take the example of big nadams, very big nadams, all take place in Jiao so, but like behind the sacrifice stones or sacred places, or like sumyao, inside temples. The Shampuyin, 2 wings were inside
training
2 temples.
In temples.
Training in temples. The dates of big competitions were not just random days. The way you do your wrestling competition, there's like ritual, there's a very specific meaning. So one point that needs to be researched, I have nothing right now on it, but it's the connection between wrestling in the Qing and in Mongolia and the religion, which is there. We just need to find more data, because it is there. Like when you win, still in Mongolia, you still do it. When you win, you bow down to the center. You go and take the tea or baijiao, and then you're given the like silk robe. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are small rituals that are not meaningless. They're very defining of a very specific practice. And for those that live those kind of wrestling, those kind of practice, they're meaningful. As you said, your friend like went to pray to the mountain and then start winning.
Yep, it's true, man.
Yeah.
At least in his mind, you believed it, right? So.
Yeah. The important is not like it does something exist or not, but like, do the wrestler believe what he's doing?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay, guys, let's get on to the next one. Okay, this one's for Lavell. It's still from the same guy, and it's having studied both Shuaijiao and Bokh, do you see any crossover or similarities? I think we've kind of discussed quite a lot of that. So. Yeah,
we've discussed a lot of that. I mean, I do. I think I don't even see them fully as being separate. The only thing I see that separates Bokh and Shuaijiao right now is like grips, right? But if you learn really good gripping for either style, you can do the other one no problem without really training it much. And the other crossover, I would say it like this. Mongolian wrestling can help you be great at Chinese wrestling, but Chinese wrestling isn't necessarily going to cross over to Mongolian wrestling as much, because the rule set, right? So you're not going to be used to the no weight divisions, the no time limit. You're going to be wanting to rush through every technique. And you don't get that, but Mongolian wrestling allows you to develop so much more in terms of being an overall wrestler that I think it, let me say it real simple. If you do Mongolian wrestling, I truly believe, let's just say from jacket styles, you can do any jacket style or belt style wrestling and be decent. But you can't say the same if you just do Chinese wrestling, right?
I see.
Unless you train Chinese wrestling the way that the Mongols train Chinese wrestling. So that's what I was saying.
All right, cool. Okay, the next bunch of questions are from, and they're good questions. So they're from Vincent Sang.
My man.
So here we go. Let's get into it. Anything we know was actually lost with the fall of the Qing? So are we sure? Are there any specific things that we know were lost at the fall of the Qing?
I mean, I think that already the fact that like we had to rediscover everything, all these things, it's a big hint. Things might have like been lost.
Yeah.
We cannot be sure about it.
I'll say something on this regard, and I think the interesting part about all this, and I mentioned it in the part 3, is that irrespective of what happened with the official imperial power, whether it was made a sport or wasn't a sport or whatever, the Mongols never stopped wrestling. So there's a very interesting thing there that's a link between the past and the present.
Exactly.
So if there was something that you could have said was ceased or lost directly within the Shampo-Ying or Beijing itself, etc., when it came out, you could look there to the Mongols and probably find it. Because they just continued irrespective. So I don't know if we'll have specifics to say what was lost, but hopefully all of it's come back in one form or the other.
Yeah. I mean, something, for example, that we know it's not practiced anymore, but was thought up to the Republican era was like joint locks and prohibited movements.
Okay. Yeah.
They were all there. Like I know some, I've been thought some. Li Baoru knows a ton.
Yeah.
And like a lot of those movements got like forgotten.
Yeah.
Leg grabs with like knee locks or like elbow locks and throw, all that kind of stuff.
The thing is, it was a lot of them were taken to Taiwan because like the way I learned Shuaijiao, the first thing we learned was all the locks. Like we learned, a lot of locks. But
that could have been added. That could have been added because it did become a police and thing there.
Yes, that's what I'm saying because you don't really know. And I mean, talking about Chinna and locks is a whole nother topic. Like, who really knows, like where they were even getting that from?
Well, the other thing is, and I talked to you guys earlier today. I mean, my teacher's got a manual that was printed in China in the 1890. Was it 4? Anyway, and it was published here, and it was a translation of a Japanese jiu-jitsu manual. We know that a lot of the judo/jiu-jitsu submission, takedown, lock, and those submission kind of China techniques as well were already being spread here, and there was already exposures here. So how much was taken from there? How much went there? Who the hell knows, right? And then, of course, if you've got the art going into Taiwan and becoming an official police thing, they're definitely going to take the best things that are to be used in that environment and add to it. Where it came from, it could have come from Japanese arts. They're good at it. Let's give credit where credit's due. They're good at submission stuff, So, and judo was immensely popular. I mean, let's not forget it was the first Asian sport to be included in the Olympic Games, and it got included pretty early. So it speaks to the success and the spread of judo, not just in the world, but definitely in Japan and then in East Asia as a whole. So, yeah. Okay, I'll go to his next question. How much of the foundation of Shuaijiao is from Shampo-Ying practices, and how much from the influence of Chinese martial arts and associated concepts?
So as we said before, there's a lot of movements, a lot of Jibangong that came from the Republican era. When you have like that high number of like the Jibangong movements, it's later. So knowing for sure what was during the Shampooyin and what was added is very difficult unless we find a manual.
Yeah, it's really
from that period.
Yep.
And I have like some ideas from the future about it, but that's my bet. I need to play my cards very well. We'll see if I can find it.
You're looking for a manual.
I'm sure there's something. So part of my research is based on this bet. And this bet is that, so today Lavell mentioned to us, it's a dictionary. A dictionary in 3 languages, Chinese, Manchu, and I think Mongolian. And inside it, the dictionary was wanted by Qianlong Emperor. And there's a big category in it under another macro category, wrestling techniques. What does this tells us? It tells us that there was a vocabulary in Manchu, like a vocabulary for those movements in Manchu.
Yeah.
A second thing it tells us is if they ever written something down because they were like Manchu, remember that they wanted to keep stuff separated, you know?
Yeah.
It's very likely written in Manchu.
Yeah. You got to look at the Manchu record. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the reason why I'm trying to, I'm studying, I'm going to do all the work, and I have some ideas where this stuff might be in the future. But it's a bet, so we don't know if there is.
Are you have you considered looking into the Japanese, because they've been doing a lot of work with maintaining and keeping old Manchu records?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything on the Japanese side right now, but I'm going to try to reach there because one of the transcription that I have from that vocabulary is a Japanese one.
Yeah.
That I'm using.
Mm.
Yeah.
But there is something definitely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh. Okay, next one. What lessons did the Shuaijiao show, the Shuaijiao practitioners, gain from Ushijima's stay in China? You looked into this recently.
Yeah, I was looking into this. I talked with some old guys, and I made a small post about it because we have some written records, people talking about it, and there was this guy with a YouTube channel that reached out to me asking for some sources, which is called Chadi, yeah. And if I'll have time next week, I'll translate a couple of.
Does he have something to give to you to look at, Chadi?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually contacted him before as well. I asked him if he wanted to be on my podcast a year ago. He never answered me, so I was like, all right.
Well, I can put you in contact with him.
Okay.
And so we're not sure. So we know these encounters happened. We know they had he went there 3 times. There's memories of this happening both in Wang Wenyong's book and Li Ru's book too. But there's just mainly stories that the old folks tell. He did this move and Bao Sanling did this other move, and then Sun Sha tried to wrestle that's just like that. So we don't really know. But what we know is that these things happened. There was mutual respect. As much as when he went back to Japan, he wrote something on a letter. I don't remember what it was. If it was a letter or a diary, on his diary or something. But mutual respect. This dude was amazing, super strong. Okay.
He looked like it too, like a beast.
I mean, he's the coach of Kimura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was nicknamed the Demon. So
yeah,
it's a crazy dude, and it's cool that in the memories of the old folks, was they say that he was wrestling without shoes, and the picture that we have of him wearing a dalian, he's without shoes. He is wearing no shoes.
Yeah, because he's probably more comfortable because he's used to doing it without shoes on.
Exactly.
Right? So,
instead, boots for wrestling was a very important thing, both in Mongolia and in China.
Yeah.
So no, we don't know. We don't know what he learned. We don't know what happened. It might be that he thought something and they taught something to him, but we don't know.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know the way.
No. But it's cool we have pictures.
Yeah.
Okay, what were the Shuaijiao cliques in Republican era, and how has it affected development today? Like, so it says like who was right with who, so who was working with who and who wasn't working with who, were there little groups of people, etc. in the Republican era?
And this is like, I don't think I can answer. This is too big. Like, there's a ton of dudes, okay? Yeah. And most of the times, those that are mentioned more are, Bao Shanlin or Xiong Deshan, I don't know, Man Baozhen, then the four Beijing, Tianjin for Zhang. But there's like a ton. There's like a lot of them. I can't really answer this question. We can, like, I can't really, this is too big.
Yeah, people forget. Big. Like, I mean, Vinny's, where's Vinny from? He's from Taiwan, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's in there, but he's from the U.S. But yeah, same difference.
I mean, both, even in the U.S., like, people don't realize, like, the U.S. and Taiwan as well, the community is smaller. Yeah. So, everybody knows everybody, and you come to China, and you're like, especially in that period when the wrestling was hot, there's a lot of wrestlers, man. You can't possibly know everyone. It's a lot of people.
Well, I have a big, like, series of notes and names, and where they Han, where they Manchu, where they Hui. I have, like, pages of names and pages of stories, but it's very difficult to put them all together. But we can say the most thing was like Tianxiao, okay, with Bao Shanlin, Shen Yousan. But there was like other temples like the Huguosi that you mentioned, Hongmiao, a lot. Like there was a lot of like wrestling grounds in Beijing with super good people.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go into his next question. So, what exactly is the so-called Manchu handwork? We spoke about this, so I think he got to answer it. Manchu handwork. Yeah.
What is it?
The grip work, like the way that they grab and the way that they use their hand.
That.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to his next one. Did Shuaijiao Bokh already have leg grabs before Mongolia split off with Russian help?
Yes. I mentioned that earlier too. Yeah. Like they already during Genghis Khan times, they're already doing that. But we got to remember that there's different styles of Bokh, and they have different rules. Some are belt, some are different jackets. Like some just whatever. So or no jacket. So there's so many things and styles and different interpretations of it depending on the place. But yeah, Shuaijiao Bokh specifically did have leg grabs. I'm pretty sure since 1,000 years, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, did Bokh once emphasize more throw, takedowns, and pins? Again, we spoke about this.
Yeah.
So we spoke about this again with the multiple styles. You spoke about the image, so he can refer to that. Do we know which Shuaijiao exercises directly correlate with specific Bokh exercises or certain aspects of Mongolian lifestyle that give certain attributes? Again, I think we've spoken about this. So.
Well, I can say something not really about this, but like a proof again to people that struggle to believe what we're saying, that is from Mongolian wrestling. Let's just look at all the fundamental Jibengong that we have in Shuaijiao. There is no Jibengong to grab the legs.
Yep.
Zero. There's zero movement in the Jibengong practice that is to grab the legs. Nothing. It's only leg stuff. Or like qie. There's nothing to grab the legs. Okay, we have movement, the various baotui, so like hugging the legs, but there's no jibengong. And jibengong is fundamental. Yeah, no basic.
Well, the thing is, here in Inner-Mongolia, they'll do jibengong for leg techniques.
I mean, this.
Well, they have a couple of different ones. Normally, we do about 3 or 4, but they're more like it's just for warm up. A lot of them are newer drills, right? Because like even the Mongol wrestlers that don't do leg grabbing at all, they even do it just to warm up.
Exactly.
It's like, do they even know what they're doing? But yeah,
picking up a sheep.
The camel.
All right. Was wrestling a common pastime for all bannermen?
Oh, this is have a cool thing. Oh, so yes. So, yes. Every banners had a wrestling instructor.
Right.
Every banner.
Every compound in every banner. Yeah.
And so these instructors came from the Shampooing, of course. They were not just random dudes. And I translated a month ago, I sent it to Vinny, a poem. It's a ballad about wrestling, and it tells a story. I can resume it very quickly. So there's a detachment of a banner in the north. Okay, this is a poem. I mean, it's from the. Let me check that. It's from. I'll check very quickly. It's from around the mid. The end of the 16th, 17th century. Around that period. And the ballad tells us the story. There's a detachment of a banner in the north. And a guy that brings a message to the banner from the emperor. Okay, the guy arrives, and everybody looks at him, and he started reading what the emperor told the banners. And the message goes like, why in these recent... Which, by the way, this message goes very well along with what Qianlong Emperor was saying in that period. Why do I have so little fierce generals? Like, you're not strong enough. Like, you're not... Qianlong would say you're not following the Fedoro. So the old ways properly. So what do you need to be stronger. You need to be more brave. And what do? What the emperor orders them to do is to set up a wrestling competition. And they set up this wrestling competition, and the poem describes it a little bit, and describes exactly how they were moving, and exactly it describes the magishk, so the movement, the jumping, the coming back and forth. If you ever did Mongolian wrestling or have seen it, it describes the fact that they were holding into each other, trying to trip each other but not falling down. Mm-hmm. It describes how they were dressed. It describes the Tao Ku and the Zotok, and then goes on talking about hunting. And this is interesting because wrestling was a practice that was always there during the big hunts.
Oh yeah, we saw that even in the picture.
Exactly. So.
And all bannermen had to attend the hunt.
Yes. But those that were closer to the emperor were a very limited number.
Yeah.
And these hunts were used by the emperor to shed fear into those that were invited, like the Mongolian kings.
Yeah.
To show them the military power that the Qing had during that period. So we can hunt for days, weeks. These hunts were long as shit,
Yeah.
And they had wrestlers, and the wrestlers were both, Mongolians and Manchu. So yes, every banner wrestled, at least knew how to wrestle.
Yeah. I don't know if you recall, there was a period in time that the bannermen were trying to outdo each other with who could draw a heavier bow. I don't know if you heard about this. But did you hear that they started taking performance-enhancing drugs?
No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, in the Qing Dynasty, apparently they got a hold of some shit that was helping them. They were doing some form of traditional Chinese medicine steroids in the Qing Dynasty. So much so that the emperor had to write an edict about it. He had to say, you guys want to pull heavy bows? You got to do it naturally. So, it's really interesting.
I think I heard about it because a lot of people started to get injured.
Yeah, but taking performance-enhancing stuff, whatever it was, I'd like to know what the hell they were taking, because back then it's interesting, right? All right, let's go on to his next question. Did some of the wrestling filter down to the Green Standard troops?
I don't know. So the Green Standard troops were those that were non-Manchu, Mongolian, or just everybody.
Some of them were surrendered. They were the surrendered soldiers of the Ming. Surrendered, not switch side, but surrendered after conquering.
Well, it might be, as we said, if you're like a soldier and I tell you have to wrestle, you're gonna wrestle.
Look, I've got a few ideas about this. We don't have any records of green standard wrestling. We need to understand that the green standard were the same thing as a local police, a local security force. They weren't the same thing that they would they would send them into battle as in just like extra men, right? But they weren't like the people that they'd rely on. The bannermen would come in and just destroy. Those were the soldiers, right? So the Green Banner had no real incentive, really, especially since they got paid poorly. So we know that a lot of them would do additional work on the side to make enough money, and they wouldn't have had time to practice wrestling or anything else. That's why a lot of them were really poor soldiers. I mean, there's even records of Green Standard soldiers that would pay a beggar or some vagrant to take their place in some, like they had to be in at a post somewhere. They'd pay this dude less than they were getting paid, obviously, to go do it. So they weren't keen on being soldiers in any shape or form. The reality is they'd probably not then go out of their way to become strong wrestlers. What's the incentive? There's no incentive. So
yeah.
All right, cool. Oh, and also they had no authority. They had no respect for the authority of the Qing as well. So there's that too. Yeah.
They didn't really want to please the emperor.
They had no incentive. That's what I. All right, cool. His next question was, what are some of the pros and cons of modern day standardization of Shuaijiao? I think we've covered that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. Again, he's asking about anything different about the Hui community that was training Shuaijiao. Was there anything different about how they trained Shuaijiao?
Well, no, I don't think so, because I'll tell you this. There's the Hui as a Minzu, as a minority, I don't want to say it's controversial, but it's we don't really know the degree to which they felt the belonging to this, especially in, let's say, very recent period of time. So I don't think so, especially because by the end of the Qing, they were already by the mill. Like, they were already training inside the Shampuyin and I don't think so.
All right, cool. Let's see there next.
I mean, if there's differences, it might be just like details in like the Jibengong or techniques. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, he asks, is it fair to say Uzemchin Bokh represents one of the more OG or Qing era-esque wrestling formats?
Yes. So for instance, like I told you, in Inner-Mongolia, we have 4 styles of Mongolian wrestling that are in Inner-Mongolia. Most people see what I do, which is Jangat Bokh, and they think that's just Inner-Mongolian wrestling, but there's other styles. So it's also called, some people call it Ujumchin Bokh or Chahar Bokh. Like, it's got different names because the reason why they accredit and they give so much like praise to the guys from Ujumchin is because really it boils down to this. They are kind of like the OGs, right? In a way. But because when China was really doing their thing with Inner-Mongolia, if you know what I'm saying, we won't have to get too much into that. The Mongols that they couldn't really try to assimilate and really, destroy in a way were the Ujumchin guys, because they're so far out there and it's their land is so harsh, and they live so spaced out, so they couldn't really control them the same way they did the ones that were more near the cities and stuff like that. So they remained much more pure in Bokh, right? Their Bokh still remained really high level, and they stayed kind of that nomadic kind of country lifestyle. So during this large time frame until pretty recently, they remained the kings pretty much of the Inner-Mongolian Bokh. They were the winners all the time, right? Now we're starting to see other places develop as well, and now there's champions from everywhere in Inner-Mongolia. But for the longest time, they were, because they were the ones that remained really hardcore Mongols in the time when you couldn't really be. You see what happened to Tung Lao and stuff like that in Shifeng. But so yes, they are, but I would even say places like Lanchi, like the Chahar Mongols, I would even say that they are the real OGs. Because if you look at the old, I told you the first recording of where Jangga comes from, it was from Lanshi, it was from those people, right? So we don't really know, but yeah, I would say they are the OGs.
All right, cool. You got something to say, man? No?
No, I think.
Okay.
I think I'm 100% on this.
Okay, were Republican era Mongols also attempting to define and codify wrestling? No, that was just fucking wrestling. I mean, let's be... you know, it's like, what are they gonna? It's like saying, were Republican era Mongols also attempting to define and codify their wrestling, like the
Republican era Mongols?
Yeah, like Mongols living in the nothing changed. They were just wrestling.
Yep.
Nah, they were just wrestling. Like I mentioned earlier, they weren't the whole the way we view Mongolian wrestling now with the techniques and the standardized, kind of, when you say Hunteruk here, you know what technique that is. You say Duga. But before, even talking to the professor about this, he was explaining that even when he was younger, I asked him a question. I said, were the wrestlers better now or then, or what was the difference? And he was like, back then you had so many more techniques because no one really trained all together as a team where you all learned the same stuff. You came up with whatever you had to come up with. Everyone kind of had a different style of gripping and whatever. So, he said it was a little bit more dynamic actually back then when he was younger, not having a kind of really set
standardized
structure. Standardized this form to follow. So that made me think a little bit too. I was like, that would have been interesting to see how that was like. But so let's just be real. Also, again, until the 90s, they were still nomads. And no one had time to go to one location to train and do all this stuff and put things together. They barely have time for that now,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All right, cool.
That's for most, even during in China, as we mentioned before, you learn a little bit from this guy, a little bit from that guy.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, did Mongolian wrestlers use any of the Qing Dynasty weight training equipment, or was that more of a Manchu Han-Hui thing? We kind of spoke about this, about the way of life that you just spoke about with the training equipment.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. What contributions were made to Shuaijiao by the Tibetans, if any?
Wait. Before we go on, I gotta say one thing. Because I actually asked wrestlers here about the old style of training and using different methods and or using a bow, pulling the bow, and I remember Hugo was like, he said, because he was like, oh, the Chinese did that? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, if the Chinese were so good at using the bow, why did we kill them? So I was like, damn. He's like, why did we conquer them so easily? I was like, this man is but he was making a joke, but what he was saying is what he meant really was, we don't practice just pulling a bow. We actually shoot bow and arrow. We do these things. We just live that lifestyle.
Yeah,
we don't that way. And
the poundage of the bows are different between Manchus and Mongolian bows.
Yes. But he doesn't really care about that much. He's just saying to be funny. But yeah, man.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's go to his next one. Oh, sorry. Actually, this was about the same one. Any ideas about Tibetan contributions?
No. I think that they still wrestle. It's very interesting. I think they wrestle belt wrestling blindfolded, something like that.
Not blind. There's two styles of Tibetan wrestling. It's not necessarily blindfolded. What it is one style you can't trip. It's belt wrestling, but you can't use your legs to trip and hook and stuff. The other style you can use your legs to trip and hook. I've never seen them do it blindfolded. Maybe some people do, because also, again, with Tibetan, there's so many different groups of people within there that have slightly differences. But I don't see how that. There's no evidence of how that influenced anything.
No, look, I mean, we know kind of that the Mongolians affected the Tibetans very much in a couple of aspects. Horse racing, which they still are it's very popular. But wrestling has never been as popular with them, like horse racing. So we know that they love the horse racing, and that was probably more than likely influenced from the Mongols. So, yeah. All right, cool. How were folks like Ma Liang, Tong Zhongyi, and Chang Dongsheng, etc., regarded by the Mongol wrestlers or martial arts military men of that time? Had Huha heard of any of these people?
No. I mean, so there are people here that know of them, but they don't know of them like we do. They don't study them and be like, oh, those are great. They study old Mongol wrestlers. They're going to be like, oh, we have this legend and we know this great wrestler that won this Nadam in 1622 or whatever. But they could care less about a Chinese guy that did some wrestling. They really don't know.
And in Republican era, no ideas either, huh?
No idea. I mean, they definitely didn't know that back then, because I'm pretty sure most Mongols at that time didn't read or do any of that. I mean, people got to understand, we're in 2022. Most of the country Mongols here, like the wrestlers, that community, not the city people, but they, most of them, that wrestlers, they stop school when they're like young, 10, 12. You know what I mean? Like, they it's not saying they can't read or write. I'm not saying that, but it's like they're not going to be educated in the way, like, looking up the history of things. They don't care about that. They care about what's going on now. Like, how's your wrestling right now? Right? So it's a little bit different mentality. I wish they did care more, but being a nomad, like traditionally, and being a herdsman, I think you don't really have time for that kind of stuff. Traditionally, right? And I think, me personally, what I see is that the Mongols now, even though they're shifting more into the towns and the cities, their mind hasn't, because it's so new, their minds haven't quite yet become, like, gotten out of the old kind of nomadic mentality, right? Okay. Like, think about this, like, well, when you guys come here, and Byron, you've been here, when you kind of go to the country, you'll see some of the Mongols, like, if they're not with their animals or wrestling, they're bored out of their mind. They have no idea what. They just don't know what else there is to do except for those things, even though they're living now in this modern time. It hasn't clicked for them yet. I'm sure the next generation will, but right now it's still kind of like, here's old school, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. That's the end of Vinny's. Then there's one last question. How do Emanuele and Lavell see the relation of these two arts with other combat-related arts? So, for example, several notable wrestlers in the past were also masters of so-called Kung Fu styles, and many of the stances of long fist styles are found in various guises in Shuaijiao. In the Mongol context, are there any commonalities with Bokh, horse riding, and archery? So, I think basically what he's saying, what's the relationship between Shuaijiao and other Chinese martial arts styles? I mean, I'll say one thing in the meantime. Like, I do Bagua, and Bagua has throws which, for example, Qing style Bagua was from Cheng Tinghua, who was living in the south side of Beijing, and he had studied with people that came out of the Shampuying when wrestling started to come out. So his Bagua has a lot of throwing in it. So for sure we see that too, and we also know that there's been some interaction between northern Chinese martial artists, and of course they incorporated a lot of wrestling, etc. So there's that. I don't know if you guys have any.
Yeah, I mean, okay. All I would want to say is a little bit different, but it's something that I just thought about. Was like, people kind of ask me, like, what's the relationship between Chinese martial arts and Shuaijiao, and, like, you know, how do they fit together? And pretty much you just said it, right? But the key that you got to think about is that people that did Chinese martial arts, they learned Shuaijiao and then added it to their game. But they're still adding a Manchu Mongol art to their game. So it's not like all of a sudden it's Kung Fu. The same way is that I'm an American, just because I learned Mongol Bokh doesn't make it American Bokh now, because I'm American, right? Just because you're from a different group doesn't mean that you do it now. It becomes.
You're not going to open a school, American Bokh, and write on the wall, this is a black belt academy, and
no, but you know what I'm saying? So it's like, because you see a lot of Kung Fu people, it's like, oh, like, We
Because
have
I want to get a red, white, and blue Jadok whenever you make one. You know, with an eagle.
It would be kind of hot. Nah, but but really though, like people have to understand that there were different arts that people just kind of like MMA, man. You just took pieces of it and you're like, yo, this kind of works. And because sometimes I find that Kung Fu people try very hard to find throws within their form. They're like, that's a throw. And they'll argue about it for years about what's a throw and what's not. And they'll be like, well, it comes from Shuaijiao. I'm sure it comes from maybe some wrestling, form of wrestling, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it comes from like the Shampoo-Ying wrestling, right?
Well, so people were throwing each other since the dawn of time. So if you're fighting, you're inevitably going to have throws in there. So
yeah, so I don't really know fully the relationship except for, like you said, people that actually learned something and then added it to it, right?
Well, I was just trying to give him a specific example, but in general, I mean, throwing is something that's a combat. Wrestling, control, and throwing is a very basic of combat. So if you're going to have a martial art that's developed to used in a wild environment with not a rule set, it's going to have those aspects over time.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah. Exactly.
Also, like, I think this comes up a lot of times, I think, because people kind of misunderstand the fact that like this wrestling is not the technique itself. Wrestling is kind of like with sanda. It's like a set of rules, okay?
Yeah.
Like if I have a certain set of rules, if I can't punch you in the face, okay, if I can't kick you, I can only like wrestle you to the ground or throw you. Like the game develops differently. And you can add like your throws inside Bagua or you implement it, but it's not going to be, I wouldn't call it wrestling. I would call it a throw.
It's a throw.
You know, yeah, it's not, like wrestling is a different thing.
Takedown, yeah. All right, well, that's
we know people that like did some stuff, but like Mambao Zhen did some Tongbei Quan and like Tai Chi.
Yeah.
But like, there's room, like the problem is that some people say, you know, Mambao Zhen or others implemented Tongbei Quan inside Shuaijiao.
Yeah.
How? Like, can you prove it to me, or it's just like a rumor?
Yeah.
Because if you see maybe like Baoding stuff, it's clear.
Yeah.
Like the wrestling in Baoding, it's clear.
Yeah.
That is like influenced by the local styles.
Yeah.
But it's different too if you don't have like specific sources, or like if you can't prove it, it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think like we said, it's a basic idea in combat, so you're gonna find it in Chinese martial arts, and it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody went and learned Shuaijiao and put it in there. So
yeah.
All right, well, that's the end of the questions, guys, and I think it's been a really long chat. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys wanted to talk about?
I think I would give I just have some advice to give, something I've been thinking about lately. Advice to give to people trying to learn Shuaijiao and Bokh, right? If you're going to learn these arts, treat it like anything else and try to actually learn the art. You know, what I've been finding is a lot of people that have other backgrounds, what they'll do is try to learn Shuaijiao, or let's just talk about Bokh. They'll try to learn Bokh because it's so new and different for most people. But they do it, even Shuaijiao, they do it in a way to where they're trying to use their other arts to do it, rather than actually learning it and learning the movements of it. You cannot, just because you do Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, doesn't mean your Shuaijiao is going to be good. You need to learn Shuaijiao. And once you learn it, then you can start to add it. But the other styles that you do, like Mantis or whatever, Tiger, the things, the attributes you develop as an individual, as a warrior, whatever, a fighter, whatever, a martial artist, those things should come out naturally within your Shuaijiao. But you're not going to actually do the form, the shape of it. The expression is going to be different, right? So like I talk about Mantis, like I know a lot of guys that do Mantis, they try to do Mantis when they do Shuaijiao. Hey, no, don't. Just wrestle. But the clamping methods that you have, that you develop, the strength from it, the attributes, that you can use, that going to naturally come out. It's just like me. I've been a power guy my whole life when I'm very explosive. So and especially from doing Hongai a lot and other arts, when I do Shuaijiao, I perform that way. I got explosive movements. But I don't do I'm not going to do Shuaijiao like I'm doing Honga, right? I'm not gonna drop in my horse stance like I'm trying to move me, right? No, I'm gonna try to rest just like that's what I'm going to do now with Bokh.
Well, I've seen you grab people's jackets like this.
No, I'm trying to actually do Bokh and learn it, and then that will become part of me, and that will be in everything that I do. So that's really my advice to people. It's like, yo, really try to learn what's going on for real, not what you're just seeing, what's really going on with these arts, and let it become part of you, just like you would with everything else you do, right?
And then let it mix within you, and then let it manifest out of you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, it's been a long chat. I mean, I didn't realize it would be this long, but I think it was a good chat. So thanks for doing this. It's the first one that we've done like this. We'll what is this message on the screen? I'll just move that off there. All right, cool. And then thanks for joining in on this, and maybe we'll do this again in the future if there's any other interesting topics. So I'll put as usual your contact details in the information below the video. And yeah, thanks a lot. See you next time.
Thanks to you, Byron.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.